Okay, so what I want to do is talk a little bit about the experimentation that we have been doing recently about um, about meditation and particularly something we call focused awareness. So so there are a bunch of different types of meditation that people do. The most common meditation form, I think, is actually transcendental meditation or relaxation meditation. They have a lot of similarities. They tend to be sometimes accompanied by music. The intention is to get you into a relaxed state. There is a certain amount of passivity in transcendental meditation and its variants. Um, and we'll talk about that with respect to a study that did EEGs with people doing this form of meditation. And then the second thing on our list, which is focused attention meditation. This is a form of meditation in the category of mindfulness meditations. And mindfulness meditations, people don't tell you what kind of meditation you're going into. So I'll describe mindfulness meditation. It's when you are asked or you deliberately choose to focus on the activities of your mind. Um, so, for example, one common meditation in Zen Buddhism is to focus on your breath. And so in this form of meditation where you're focusing on your breath, you also pay attention to what your mind is doing, because inevitably our attention is drawn away from the breath. We start thinking about like what we're going to cook for dinner, or the fight we had with our boss, or the problems that we're having with our car, or what's for dinner. So those distracting thoughts, we try to be mindful of them, meaning that we try to notice them at some point. And when we do notice them, we use compassion, self-compassion, to say, well, that sort of happens. And then we gently nudge our brains to thinking about what we were focusing on previously. So that's usually the breath. But this type of meditation can focus on, the feeling of your elbow, or you could have your eyes open and focus on a particular element in your surroundings, paying attention to that. All of that is focus, mindful meditation, or focused attention meditation generally. And that is also a very common type of meditation. It's usually not accompanied by music. The third form of meditation I want to talk about, there's actually several more, but I'll talk about four. The third one is something called open awareness meditation. It too is a form of mindfulness meditation, because we are paying attention to what our mind is doing. We're asked to pay attention to all sensory inputs that we're receiving. And often this type of meditation is done with your eyes open. So you may be looking around. It's different from just kind of hanging out, relaxing and looking around, because we pay attention to whether our mind is being attracted to something or not. And if it is, and if we become attached to it, if we spend a lot of time thinking about oh, there's some construction going on across the street. That's a sound sense. And then we try to figure out what kind of machine is that, or what are they doing over there? Now your mind is not doing open awareness anymore. It's focusing on a particular sensory input. And so the mindfulness aspect of this type of meditation is to notice that you're being sucked into a rabbit hole of focused sensation, and you kind of gently cajole yourself into thinking about all of the different sources of sensory input that you have. So it still carries this self-awareness or mind awareness notion, and it is still trying to control the trajectory of your mind, but it is thinking about this. It is a broad picture. It wants you to stay in the broad mindset. Finally, one that we'll probably be talking about in the future with this group is loving kindness meditation. And that type of meditation seeks to improve our compassion. By compassion, I mean our ability to imagine being in the shoes of another person and seeking to reduce their suffering, or seeking to understand their suffering at first, and then seeking to potentially reduce their suffering, while at the same time being conscious of our own self. So self-compassion is a part of most loving kindness meditations that we do. We think about other people, and then we think about ourselves. Sometimes we deliberately think of people that really bug us or that we can't stand. And then we try to have a compassionate view towards them, which exercises, of course, compassion. So the ones that we'll talk about today are the first three. And then you'll see that some of our meditations that we've been experimenting with lately involve focused attention meditation and open awareness meditation as well. So there have been a bunch of EEG, electroencephalogram studies. These are studies that measure brain waves. So we all have kind of consistent brain waves that operate at a particular frequency, and alpha waves and theta waves are distinguished between each other by the frequency that the electrical waves that dominate our brains are operating. So I think, I can't remember, but I believe theta waves are a little slower, but we'll see that in the next slide because I show some graphs there. Mindfulness meditation for experienced meditators seems to drive theta wave production. So that theta waves occur in people who are not meditating, and they happen when we are deeply relaxed, when we're thinking of ideas and trying to explore those ideas, when we're involved in acts of creativity, or when we're actively dreaming and during sleep. When we look at experienced meditators, we see that when they go into a meditative state, they quickly move to a theta wave state. That isn't true for inexperienced meditators. They typically move into the sort of, well, they definitely show alpha wave production, and that's sort of a resting, reflecting, wandering mind sort of state. And that kind of relates to when you think about the mindfulness meditation description I gave, that you're gently trying to nudge your brain into focusing on one thing. You can see that would likely exercise neurons that are involved in controlling the focus of our minds. And we see outcomes, the outcomes that we see behaviorally for people who do meditate is usually a much better self-regulation, meaning that when people who meditate heavily feel anger or are challenged in some way, their expression of anger is typically much lower than you would see with someone who is not meditating. And the science around that part of meditation is fairly well understood, the self-regulation portion of that. I should ask if there are questions and if I'm confusing people as I'm discussing this. So any thoughts or questions or, all right. Yeah, just ask. So one study, which I really like this study, but the person who did it, I felt like he was in a graduate program and he's Korean. So the paper was in Korean and it was translated to English, but the paper did a comparison of no music focused meditation, sort of mindfulness, typical mindfulness meditation, with meditation that included music. And so what we see here is on the left-hand side is the beginning state that people were in. You can see that theta waves are a lower frequency than alpha waves. So theta is 4 to 7 hertz. That means 4 to 7 cycles per second. Pretty slow. That's actually a lower tone than we can, if it were an audio signal, it would be lower than we can actually hear. And alpha waves are in a similar state. They're lower than 20 hertz, which is about the lowest that we can hear. So you see that at the beginning state, these are two sides of the brain. And I believe this is the right hemisphere and this is the left hemisphere. But what you're seeing is that before meditation, not that surprising, alpha waves dominate, and that is not being aroused, resting, reflecting, mind wandering sort of state. Similar situation over here. Theta waves are lower. In the middle of meditation with music, what we see is that theta wave production increases, and I didn't scale these perfectly. This is a higher level of absolute magnitude. You can see it says 6, right? And over here is 5. So we're looking at 4, roughly a magnitude of 4 in power. And here you're seeing 6. So in the middle of meditation, people have much more brainwave activity. And then we see a higher level of theta activity. At the end of the meditation, this is with no music, I should say. I think I might have confused people by saying it was with music, but with no music, theta wave production starts low, gets equivalent to alpha, and by the end of the meditation, we have a much higher proportionally set of theta wave production than alpha wave production. So what we see with music is this. So we see what we saw before, which was theta waves at a lower level of production and alpha waves higher here. And then we see theta waves grow, not quite reaching where alpha waves are, and then they remain lower than alpha wave production at the end. And I suppose that's not that surprising, because there's music happening and it is attracting our attention during that process. So I don't know what I'm concluding from this, but I'm presenting this because it raises questions for me. It raises my interest in this area. Have all of us experienced music meditation and non-music meditation? Do we have any comments about that?
I mean, would music one be just, I mean, I've done ones where someone is talking and doing guided and there's some like peaceful music in the background. I'm not sure if that's music meditation or is it purely okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I haven't done anything where it's like yours.
Yeah, it could be that, or it's a combination of guidance and background music, or it could be just a meditation with a background music that's like usually calm, relaxing music.
Yep. Okay.
And I think that's the case here, that the music was relaxing, but I will check into that. You know, I have mostly meditated without music. And then one of the first times I experienced meditation with music, actually, I think I was with Morella and you, Matt, when we were in Pikes Peak, that area.
Oh yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. So we went to that meditation and I went, oh, there's music here. It was still a good meditation, but you know, and I'm not sure I concluded anything from that, but
I mean, I don't want to take us off topic, but that meditation was interesting because it was both a meditation on music, but then also a meditation on textures.
Right.
The fabric in front of us. Yeah.
For the benefit of Vince and Tom, it was in an art gallery, and the art being presented was a bunch of tapestries that were hanging from the ceiling, and we were meditating in the middle of those tapestries.
Yeah, the tapestries, like there's like this curtains that they created small isolated spaces that were separated but by this very light, you know, fabric from each other, and created like an idea of you were separate but also in the same space with other people.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
No, I think this is very interesting because, yeah, I mean, I read the study and it wasn't like a scalable study or something that's, I don't know. It's interesting to see if there are other studies that replicated the same.
Yeah.
Or they use more subjects or stuff.
I mean, I don't know. I did my TM training very recently, so it depends, I guess, how long you did it. But when you do it now, they do a whole evening of presentation on just this type of research with the brain waves and things like that.
Really?
And yeah, they're right. You know, I
need to at least about that.
Yeah, they you know, again, I know a lot of people probably did TM training back in the 70s or something, and I don't know what it was like then, but I know now they really try to present it as like a very empirical, scientific thing.
Okay.
It's interesting. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, we should talk about that.
Yeah, you and I could like do some research together in Google Scholar or something.
Yeah.
Right. The TM is similar to mantra meditation.
Right.
In other, in Buddhist practices would be the same, similar to a mantra meditation.
Right.
I discovered Indian meditation music that sounds like nonsense to the English ear, which actually helps someone like me to concentrate. Music with words, I'll be pulled into those words too quickly. So sing car, for instance, Kaur, was, I guess, a new age composer in the 70s and 80s. And she made a lot of lovely 30-minute long pieces for meditation.
Oh.
I'll post.
Yeah, I mean, the idea behind TM is that your mantra is a word, but it doesn't mean anything. So you don't. Of course, mine was one that made me think of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar every time I send it because the way it sounded. But I asked if I could get a different one. They said no. So, but it's supposed to be it's supposed to be like a sound, like you said. If you're unless you speak Sanskrit or something, it doesn't mean anything to you. Yeah, so you don't. It's supposed to not conjure up any images, like don't think of an elephant type thing. Yeah.
So transcendental meditation does come from the Hindu tradition, and so and the chanting and that sort of thing, and but that's about all I know about it. I never actually took a transcendental meditation class, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if all of these meditative forms were being informed by science, because they're under active study, right? The amount of study for mindfulness meditation right now is growing significantly over what was happening just 10 years ago. So I'm sure we'll be finding out more. Okay, so that's that about the, okay, so the ideas that are coming for me are that music may reduce the effect of mindfulness, and I'm not sure. I'm looking forward to exploring this with Matt or anyone else who wants to discover more. What we see is that music meditation increases both alpha wave and theta wave, and non-music meditation produces a shift to theta wave dominance from alpha waves, and that is correlative with what we see in experienced mindfulness meditators as well. So something of interest. So there's plenty of stuff on particularly behavior and mental health and the effects of mindfulness based programs. That's what MBP stands for. So mindfulness based stress reduction is one thing. It's I think it was Kabat-Zinn that developed this in the context of hospitals to help patients deal with anxiety and pain. And so these mindfulness-based programs have been seen to be, so there's other things like mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And these studies seem to lump all of these mindfulness-based programs together under MBPs. So in youth, mindfulness-based programs were effective at improving reducing anxiety and stress, increasing attention. Executive functioning is our ability to make correct decisions when we're asked questions that might be about the meaning of a sentence or what is happening around us, and reducing negative social behavior. So in adults, the cognitive effects are stronger in so when mindfulness is used with especially older adults in the order of 50 and 60 years old plus, they show significant improvement in executive function and working memory. And we don't know why that is. The researchers have some theories around that cognition declines in older age. And so mindfulness practices may sort of combat that in older adults. On all accounts, depression, chronic pain, and anxiety seems to be reduced through these mindfulness meditation programs. And I list some current references, but there's plenty more to explore if that's of interest. Okay, so now let's get to what the hell we're doing. So this group, the Mindful Agility crowd, a community, the Mindful Agility community, the purpose of this started with an understanding that Agile practices, meaning these short-term, low-risk experiments to improve, had a nice complement to mindfulness practices, the ability to be aware of more relationships between the things around us, to be less reactive when challenging situations occur. We can stay in the analytic world and consider logical choices. What I saw in Agile was that you could be not very mindful and you could be highly agile. And one of my favorite examples is Donald Trump. So his political ambitions were perhaps not overall mindful. I think of mindfulness as including this notion that we are on the planet and we are highly dependent on those around us, and we're highly dependent ultimately on virtually everything around us. So we are the composite product of our parents, our friends, what we see on television, what we experience walking down the street. And it's really hard to think of ourselves as truly individuals. And so with that perspective, now you say, well, what am I doing to somebody? What am I doing for or to someone else? Now the question is, is that person really someone other than me? Or is my interactions with that person basically affecting me and everything around me? And so that, I think of that as part of mindfulness. And so I think of Donald Trump as not necessarily being quite that mindful. So, but what I will say is that his campaign strategy in 2016 certainly was highly agile. He was experimenting frequently with his voter base. He was doing things that we thought were outrageous. And then if it was outrageous to his base, he would just quietly stop doing it. And then things that really did appeal to his base, he would keep doing more. And so I'm thinking, okay, that wasn't, in the long term, even for Donald Trump, that probably isn't a great strategy. It could get him in deep trouble. But for the short term, it worked. And so I saw a benefit to mindfulness in addition to agility in achieving a greater purpose. On the other side, there is mindfulness alone, which does seem to be a great strategy for reducing stress, anxiety, for getting along with others, but it has a tendency to be more passive. And so there are a few people who in the mindfulness community who have done something sometimes called engaged Buddhism. So Thich Nhat Hanh is famous for that. taking the mindfulness concept and saying, we got to do something with this, and promoting peaceful interaction and other stuff like that. And they do use some techniques from Agile, but not that consciously. So the purpose of this is to put these things together. And the mission that I state here, I think, is roughly what we're trying to do. We're trying to help people make purposeful progress. And that in order to do that progress rapidly, Agile is very helpful. So in any event, there are some working theories that we have, and I invite critique or comment or changes or whatever. That productive goals arise from larger purpose. So when we have a larger purpose, we can pursue a goal. And then actually maybe
I think
someone has
hearing
some
some
background
noise.
I think you need to
noise. I
mute
don't
someone.
know.
I think that me,
Yeah.
Horia.
Horia. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Horia. So if we're pursuing a larger purpose, that has a bunch of benefits, actually. So if we're trying to achieve an individual goal, like we're trying to exercise more, so the larger purpose could be one of two things. It could be we might be just trying to lose weight, or in some other way become more attractive to other people. But it also could be, or alternatively could be, we're trying to improve our health. So depending on which purpose we have, there could be different alternatives. Let's say we are trying to exercise more and we're being challenged, we're not getting up in the morning and running or whatever we need to do. Other alternatives that relate to our health, if we were thinking the larger purpose was our health, we could then pursue those alternatives, or we can think about how to improve our health in a smaller form. And then similarly, if it was being more attractive, then we might pursue other means to do that and gradually build up this focus on one of those purposes, and whichever purpose you choose. So focusing on that one purpose gives us many other goals that start to become relevant to us, and we can use all of those within an Agile framework. So we can, at each sprint, if you will, we can pick one of these goals and we can try to make improvements in that area. Another theory I have is that focus is great, and it's very helpful in getting stuff done. But if we run into an impediment as we're focusing on something narrow, we can get stuck. And in order to get unstuck, we have to expand our scope, I think, in many cases. So we have an episode on from Dan Dixon on a wine store project that he was working on, and he was having trouble getting the store to adopt online transactions in the store, not just for technical reasons, but for potentially managerial reasons. He got very frustrated, couldn't think of what to do with this store, and ultimately had to take a step back and think about the process by which he was trying to make this happen. And what could he change about the process that would make this go faster? He actually had discussions with Morella and me before he came to this, and I think Matt even, too. And before he came to this conclusion, or before he started thinking in a broader perspective. But once he did come to this broader perspective, he came to some new strategies, which he implemented and started having an effect right away, making things much better. So the reason I mentioned this as a bullet point is because mindfulness meditation, as I described, there's two big ones. One is focus meditation, where we're paying attention to our breath, and or whatever it is, and then we notice our distraction from that focus and we bring our focus back. And open awareness meditation, which has us spread our focus across a very broad area and then pays attention to our mind and doesn't let us focus on something in there. And that second category, that open awareness meditation, is correlated with creativity. And so Marilla, I think I sent you that paper that showed that correlation, but I haven't been able to find it again. So I'll be bugging you later.
If I can,
yeah.
I wanted to, so I want to go back to the productive goals arise from larger purpose. And we could, like your weight loss example, we could use mindfulness, and we could use that investigation that to kind of ask ourselves questions about that larger purpose. And I think we talked about that in our podcast episode about New Year's resolutions a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Maybe we did, about kind of investigating what is my purpose and why do I care? Why? So if we say I want to lose weight, and then because, like you said, I want to be more attractive to other people, and we could use the 5 whys to kind of investigate further. Why do I want to be more attractive to other people? And we could go and try to find a deeper purpose. The deeper we go to find what's our true purpose, the more we're going to be motivated to actually keep trying and keep doing the work to get to that goal, to achieve that goal. And so we can use both mindfulness practices to help us with that, as well as agile practices, experimentation, because the more we are familiar with, okay, this is why I want to do this, the more we get to know our own motivations, what drives us, what motivates us, as well as what blocks us, what are our fears, what are our insecurities around what we want to achieve. And we will find a lot of interesting things about ourselves the more we are mindful and investigating our behaviors. Like, why do we keep doing the things we do? Why do we commit in the morning that we're going to do this thing, and then the next day we wake up and we're like, oh no, I didn't do it again? So both practices can help us, mindfulness as well as agile practices, experimentation, which would be then once you have that larger purpose, you have a better understanding of what actually motivates you. And you can use that to go back to every time that you feel discouraged and we feel like, oh, we're not getting anywhere, the progress is too slow, or we're falling back into old habits. We can go back to that larger purpose, that deeper purpose, and use it as an anchor to pull us back up. And so we can try again. And that's a very powerful combination, because that allows us, okay, I tried, but I have this bigger goal that is far away, but I can see that I want to get there, so I can go back and try another experiment to see how that goes. And then a narrow focus can lead to getting stuck. Again, mindfulness there can help us when we are faced with a problem, or we want to solve something, or there is something difficult going on. We usually get our brains work in such a way that they want to make meaning. Our brain wants to make meaning. Our brain wants to make sense of things and wants a story. and it creates a story. And once it creates that story and creates a belief and an opinion about it, then it's going to try to solve it based on that belief and opinion. And sometimes that belief or opinion is not accurate because it is coming from whatever our brain has in store from our past experiences, is trying to interpret the present, what's happening right now, based on past experiences. So it might not be really accurate. It might be, as is the case, you see a hose and in the dark and you think it's a snake. So when we can be mindful and we can take a step back and say, do I have all the information? Is this really true, what I believe about the situation? If we can widen our focus and our awareness and see things from different perspectives, see things, consider other options. And in order to be able to do that, we need to get out of our own head and say, I might not be right about this. And that's not easy to do. It's not easy to do. And that's where mindful practice helps us. It helps us loosen that sense of self-centeredness that I am right. This is blue because my brain says it's blue when it might not be blue.
Yeah.
And
I want to mention the Dan Dixon and wine store episode thing that happened. I think Dan had come, and this will be relevant to the Agilists here, is Dan had come to the conclusion that the store manager in the first time he tried this was not competent or motivated. It actually was, he said he was lazy.
Yes.
And it's very, it's very common for Agilists to encounter managers who insist that their employees are lazy. And that's why something is not happening. So, and it wasn't until the second time he tried it with a different store manager, and it didn't work that time, until maybe he had even a hint that it wasn't laziness on the part of the store manager or incompetence on the part of the store manager, that he might have to think differently. So he was operating with this theory, like you said, that the story, he was operating with the story of his work, and that story turned out not to be right. Okay, I just wanted to mention that, Merle. Sorry. Did I interrupt you?
No, that was good. Yeah, that was a very interesting conversation, and I really like that episode, so I hope you can listen to it when it comes out. So it's a very good episode where really things come together and a better understanding of things, and how it's a great example of using those skills of both mindfulness and agility to get unstuck from a situation and look at the problem from a different perspective and make the necessary changes and ultimately be successful. So it's a great example of a success story. So both focus awareness meditation and open awareness meditation are really helpful to help us become less reactive. That's the first, one of the most important positive effects of meditation of mindfulness meditation, is that it helps us become less emotionally reactive. It helps us respond more skillfully rather than react to situations in our life. But it also helps us be more observant and have a better understanding, have a more clear view about things the way they are. So we use both practices. They have slightly different, and I'm really excited, like Dan said, research is still out there, and there is already a little bit of research about what the differences between the two methods are, focused awareness and open awareness. We already know that focus awareness, that's established, it helps reduce that emotional reactivity. And what's interesting is that open awareness, when you are expanding your awareness rather than focusing on one single object of meditation, like breathing, for example, it showed that people, when you practice more open awareness, they have more focus when something unexpected happen. So let's say you're working on something, and then if you have more practice in open awareness, then something unexpected happen, you get a surprise, when you are more able to respond to that. Whereas focused awareness is less, you get less of that reaction. But both meditation, both focused awareness and open awareness have the same response when it comes to unexpected change. So they both help us, unexpected change, something that you expect. So they both have the same response to that. But when it's an unexpected change, open awareness helps us better. And that goes along with the creativity, goes along with having a wider view and being able to see things a little bit better, have a better perspective of what's going on.
So you and I had this conversation about flow, and I made the claim. I'm not sure it's a reasonable claim, but I'll stick it out there. The claim that when we're in flow, our focus is narrow. We're looking for, like you said, things that are happening around us are relatively expected. So I think of myself when programming, and when I'm really into it, when I feel like I'm in flow, it's because I understand the programming language that I'm using really well. I understand the processes that I'm going through. Small, unexpected things definitely happen. Bugs and weird things occur, but I know what to do next. When those things come up, I have it kind of just keeps going, right? Like things don't faze me. But like you said, when something comes up that's truly unexpected, that it's kind of outside the boundaries, I think it interrupts my flow. And so this is why I characterized it this way.
Right. So maybe you need more open awareness practice.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
It reminded me, another way, like I see about flow, I'm a critical care nurse, right? So as a critical care nurse, I am in flow. I consider myself in flow. Let's say when I have a very high stress situation, someone is coding, is dying, or it's really sick, and then I am in flow because I am like really acting. Same thing that you do with programming. You know what to do. You're very skilled. You have the knowledge. You have the tools, and when we are highly skilled and knowledgeable, have enough practice, we don't even need to think before we do something. We feel like things are happening on their own. And having that open awareness, open awareness practice and skill helps me that when unexpected things happen, I recognize them. That's where your open awareness comes in. Because if you are in flow, but you are narrow focused and you are doing things one step at a time, you might miss that unexpected. You might not see it.
Right.
It is that open awareness skill that allows us to notice, to observe that there is something happening, that it's unexpected, and that allows us to respond. One thing that I think about that is important in a flow state is that we are outside of our self-centered mode. I love a flow state because I am not thinking about myself at all.
Right.
It is as if I am not there. It is as this energy that things are happening when you are in flow. Whatever you're doing, programming or writing, or take care of critical care patient, or painting, or doing music, or when we are in flow, it is that things are happening in a certain way and you are not even there to do it. You're just like going with it, and you are not inside your head. So it's an egoless from a Buddhist point of view, you don't have a sense of self-centeredness at that point. And and that sense of selfless is an important skill that we get from meditation too. The more we practice meditation, both focused or open awareness or a mantra or loving kindness, any kind of meditation, the more we get a sense of that, we get a taste of what it is like to be in a selfless state, what it is like to be in a non-self-centered state, and to be also to be attuned with everything that's going on.
Interesting. Because you mentioned 5 whys, I wanted to, and there are a few Agilists here, I want to mention that and its relationship to Zen Buddhism. So 5 whys originated from Toyota, which was in Japan, and it relates quite a bit to causal analysis, which is a centerpiece of Buddhism. So there's sort of 4 noble truths. The first one is there is suffering. So if we look in the present moment and we look around us, we will see that people are suffering in different ways. And it goes to the way Buddhism came about is because this dude, Gautama, Siddhartha Gautama, decided that there was a lot of suffering and it was causing him a lot of pain himself, because he wanted to figure out how to alleviate suffering for a lot of people. So he kind of went out in the world and did this huge exploration, and the outcome was Buddhism. But the first thing that his first noble truth is, you have to acknowledge the present moment. You have to acknowledge that there is suffering. And then the second thing you do is there are causes of suffering. And so the causal analysis is a foundation of Buddhism. And I think it re-emerged in a processed way at Toyota, because they made a requirement that when a problem occurred in the factory floor, that you actually had to construct a causal chain that was at least 5 whys long before we could say that you had thoughtfully analyzed the problem. And those 5 whys are great, right? Because they reveal sort of hidden causes that we're maybe trying to avoid saying, like, well, training, if we had better training, then we wouldn't have had this happen. But you may have to go back a few stages before you realize that we hadn't trained these people to do the right thing. So I guess I'm just mentioning that as an aside, but I am showing the relationship. One other thing that shows the relationship between Agile and mindfulness, or Buddhist, secular Buddhism, which is sort of where Matt Morella and I are coming from. Okay.
I see Tom has a question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Hey, Dan, and this is a question for both you and Marilla. When you are in those states of flow, whether it's programming or being a critical care nurse, are you in a state of open awareness or focused awareness, or both?
So
yeah.
So Morella and I had an argument about this, and I claimed that I was in focused awareness, and Morella's, I don't know what you.
I think it's a switch between both of them. It's it's a switch between both of them, because you are being focused on what you're doing, as well as keeping track of everything else that's happening at the same time. And again, depending on what you are doing, because like in my example, I have to attend to lots of things that are happening at the same time. But if you're doing a solitary thing, which like writing or programming, and that might be, you know, it might not, you are working alone and you don't have outside stimuli to attend to, but you are still, I think, switching between the two. But again, this is my experience of it. And
So I have a follow-up.
Maybe
But part of this is also this. I do believe it's the switching between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, and because I know you know you've so a lot of people, you know, if you follow sports, there'll be an athlete who one day just can't throw the ball to first base all of a sudden, and they said typically what's happened is they've done it so much they don't think about it anymore. They're not using their prefrontal cortex. They're in this flow, and then one day they actually think about it, and they try to think about how to throw the ball to first base, and they can't. And until they stop thinking about it again, they can't get out of that yips, or you know, whatever they call it.
Is that the amygdala that's active when that automatic behavior is happening? Is that right? That's interesting.
no, I don't think it's the amygdala.
But it's you're not really using your. I don't think you're using your prefrontal thinking brain a lot either in that
No,
That
situation.
you're
might be
not.
true. That
Yeah.
might be true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
true. But it's not your
Yeah.
amygdala. Like your amygdala is
Right. But part of that flow is that you're not actually thinking of, because they say if you actually stopped and think about all the things your body has to do to throw the ball, your brain can't actually think about all those things, and that's when athletes will just all of a sudden like can't do what they've done well for you know years. It's a really interesting phenomenon. It's the same thing, the flow. Yeah.
right. So the
Okay,
equivalent of that for me, it would
so
be
stop for a second.
Mhm.
Tom has his hand up and we're plowing right over him.
Sorry.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. I've been reading a lot on John Boyd's OODA loop lately.
Oh yeah.
And have you mapped out any of this open awareness, focused awareness to the observe, orient, decide, act loop that Boyd is known for?
Yes, to some extent. So, but not from the perspective of yes and no, I guess. So OODA stands for observe, which is the way I view it is what is the current state of the present moment from a broad perspective. And then orient, which is to so Tom, you may have to correct me because I might get it wrong. So orient means that you focus your attention on the most important elements of your surroundings. This is OODA is what fighter pilots in the US use to rapidly take action against an opponent and then recover from that and then just keep adapting to what is happening, what they see happening, and adapt as fast as they can in order to beat their fighter pilot opponents. So observe, orient, decide, act. Orient, I think, is to pay attention to the sensory areas that are relevant to the current situation. And then decide means, and I don't know whether listing all the things you could do happens in the orientation phase or whether it happens in the decide phase, but you basically have to decide what you're going to do with the information that you have. And then with that decision, you take action, and then that takes some time, and then you sort of recover, and then you go like, okay, we got go back to observe again to see what happened. So what did I get wrong or right or whatever, Tom, with that?
A lot of great stuff there, Dan. first of all, John Boyd did not develop the OODA loop to say this is how he is successful as a jet fighter pilot. He says this is the way that the mind typically works. You take in input, you orient that input with your current mental models that you have. You evaluate your current mental models, your biases, and then you do make a list of the kinds of decisions that you would make, but then you cycle that back to, okay, you're observe and you're orient, and you're kind of doing a double loop learning kind of a situation there. And eventually you decide on what is your action going to be, and then you act. And his whole idea is if you can do that faster than your opponent is now reacting to you instead of you reacting to them. You are in their loop, you're going faster than them, you're going to completely disorient them, and you're going to shut their brain down. They're not going to be able to focus and go from there. So I see a lot of parallels here between open awareness and focused awareness, because to me, open awareness is all about observing and orienting. And then the focused awareness is, here's all my decisions and here's what it is that I'm going to actually go out and do. So when you brought up the whole thing about flow, it's like I'd never considered the OODA loop in the context of flow and what's happening there when you're in flow. And it seems like when you're in flow, you're doing the same thing that Boyd is doing while he's fighting a jet. And it's probably the same thing that you're doing while you're coding, or the same thing that Marilla is doing when she's doing her work in critical care, is you're applying that OODA loop. And I'm stoked about getting better at awareness, open awareness and focused awareness, because it's going to make me better at executing what I think is an effective way of going about and working using the OODA loop.
So what reference have you used to understand this stuff about the OODA loop?
I'm currently
Do you
reading a
wanna
book.
just text it?
Well, I sent a link to the wiki page, but most people get it wrong because they think OODA loop is only about confrontation and beating an enemy, and it's some methodology. Well, it isn't a methodology. Boyd says this is how our brain works. Take in input, orient it to your current mental models, then you make a decision, then you act. But the thing that's so great about Boyd is he says you have to constantly change your mental models, and sometimes your mental models are wrong and you got to destroy them and recreate new mental models so you're more effective as you're going along. Sorry, I get pretty excited about this stuff because
No, it's cool. So
That's
the
great.
question.
Yeah, you're right. It is very, very similar to, and it goes along also with what neuroscience has discovered about how we make decisions, how our brain works. So yeah.
yeah.
So,
Go ahead, Dan.
so you mentioned that you put it in a wiki page, but I don't know what wiki page you're
No,
referring
in
to.
our chat, I dropped in a link to the wiki page for the
Okay.
OODA loop, but I wouldn't
Oh,
rely
got
too
it.
much on that because most people just have too narrow a focus of what the OODA loop is. I mean, you guys are so in tune with what it is based on the different kinds of meditation that we're looking at here. That's why I'm pretty excited about being a part of this group here, is because I see this fits in very neatly with what Boyd was really trying to do. And again, the whole OODA loop is not about battles in the sky. It's about, this is how your brain works. And if you can get better at being observant, and if you can get better at orienting that input to your existing mental models and being mindful of your own biases, you're going to become much more effective. Now, how can you do this faster and faster and faster? This is where
All right. Sounds good. So Horia has his hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer the idea that Ian McGilchrist's work on The Master and His Emissary speaks to exactly this idea of focused versus open awareness. So the neuroscience there is, they've observed that left brain activity tends to be focused more on grip, on grasp, on detail, on focusing on a specific element, and the right hemisphere tends to have more contribution in observing focus of context. So you detach from the detail and you look at the context. So it's almost like you have two beings in the same
Mm,
body.
mm,
And
I
one
see.
is focusing on chase the prey, and the other one is focusing, but where are the other predators? Kind of
Right,
thing.
right.
And you integrate them into one being. So what you've been describing for the past while is how we get more effective when we learn how to flow between an intense focus on a particular detail and the broader awareness of context and how that suits. So both the OODA loop and the techniques that you were describing earlier seem to fit in the same general pattern of flow between detail and broad context.
Mm,
Thank
very
you.
interesting.
That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, thank you for that
By the way,
reference.
this is being recorded, and Otter does transcriptions for these things, so I'll send those out. And I have the email addresses for everybody who's here, so that will be good. I'm going to go through the rest of the slide, and then we'll talk about the experimentation that we've been doing with meditation. So Morel and I have been talking about these concepts for a while, and then one of the theories that we've been exploring is that meditation, if you look up meditation or intentional meditation, you'll find a bunch of references, but they're people who go into a meditation with an intention that is, what should I say, more of a kind of what is my mindset going to be? The intention is a sort of a mindset thing. And I was interested in whether we could use meditation to help us think about problems and consider other options. Certainly, we all go through a non-meditative approach to this. You know, we have a problem, we analyze it with 5 whys, we come up with alternatives, or we might use the OODA loop in a more logical form to construct a model and try to fit things within that model and so forth. But could we use this idea of open awareness to help us uncover options when we're stuck? So when we have we're dealing with a problem, we're not getting anywhere with the problem, and can we use the problem as some kind of it's almost a deliberate cognitive bias on our meditation in a way, right? So we started exploring that idea. Morella has run a couple of meditation sessions with this in mind, and generally speaking, it's as a guide, helping the meditator reach a general meditative state where there's less monkey mind or less distracting thoughts happening, and then bringing that meditator to an open awareness state. And this might be one of those things that's this first step of reaching a meditative state might be something that is important to do with new meditators, to bring them to a point where the noise is calmed down, the random thoughts that come into mind, and but then with the open awareness, now opening it up and still having that mindfulness, that awareness of what's happening in our minds, but being alert to sensory input from all sources, and then bringing the meditator back to focus on the original goal or problem that is appearing. So so let's see. This is I'll let perhaps Morella will walk through these stages for us and tell us what she was thinking with putting this down. Do you want to talk about it?
Yes. So this would be, it's a variation of any type of meditation we do. The difference is that we do start off by thinking about something that we want to work with, either a problem we have or a difficulty we have or a goal we have, something we want to achieve. And it is important that we do not start off doing this work with something that is really important to us, or it's really stressful to us. It's like a life-changing decision. But something which is like on a scale from 1 to 10, it's about a 3 or a 4. That way we will not get overwhelmed during the process, and we will be able to reap the benefits of the practice. We do this at the beginning, we write it down. And I think it's important to distinguish between the issue you want to work with and the intention, because we need, when we think about those things separately, we have something that we want to work with. Let's say Dan's example, he wanted to write more about, right, Dan? That's what you wanted to do. Yeah, so you want to write more, and then that's the thing you want to work with. But then what is the intention? The intention is kind of a skill you want to gain, or something that you want to gain from the practice that you're doing, which could be, I want my writing to be more flowing, or I want my writing to reach more people. I want anything that would be, I want to be more skillful in my wording. I want to be more motivated. So the intention is something, it's the type of skill that is going to benefit us in the longer term to achieve that goal that we are working with. That's why I like to separate those two, because I think it's important to have a more broad intention of a skill together with a more narrowed, like, one thing that I want to work with. Then the meditation starts with the body scan. We let that go, we have written that down in front of us, and we try to let that go, and we come to a meditative state by first focusing on the body, which is a type of focused awareness, because we are focusing on different parts of the body, and we're trying to come to the present moment. We're trying to take our brains out of that mode that it's usually autopilot, or thinking about the past, or worrying about the future, and we're trying to bring our brains, our minds in the present moment. We're trying to be grounded. And once we do that, then it's easier to move to the next step, which is the focused awareness. So we're going to focus on breathing for a little bit, and that will help us bring a sense of calmness. It will help us also start to notice more, start to observe what's happening with us. What are the sensation? What is the feeling tone? How are we feeling? Do we like what's happening? What are our thoughts? How are we thinking? Are we being judgmental with ourselves? Are we being open? So we start to develop this sense of curiosity and also being aware. We're already starting to develop some awareness that when we move on to the next step, which is the open awareness, now we can our minds are a little bit calmer, a little bit more focused, and now that we can open up our awareness and see what's happening around us and within us. But we don't have anymore a narrow focus, like on the breathing, for example. When we do that, the more we practice that, the hope is that when we practice open awareness, we notice that all of these things that are happening in our awareness, the sounds, the sensations, even our thoughts, because our minds are not going to stop thinking. And that's not even the goal. The goal is not to stop thinking. The goal is to know that we are thinking. So there is a knower. There is a person that is thinking, and then there is a knower that knows that is thinking. So we're trying to get to another layer of awareness, another layer of observing. And that way we can sense this open awareness, we can sense this openness, that things are not that tight, things are not that narrow focused, like my mind thinking, my monkey mind going. And when we are in this state of openness, when we can observe things with a little bit of distance, even if it's a very small distance, but we are aware of what's going on, then we go back to what we wrote in the beginning. And by that time, hopefully in the practice, you completely forgot about it. And that's good. You had this gap of time that gave your brain, that completely dissociated your brain from the problem in the beginning. So now you're coming at it with fresh eyes, and you're coming with it with this heightened sense of awareness a little bit. And then you are going to write down whatever comes to mind, like a freestyle writing, and see, because whatever it's coming up right now, it's something that's coming up from a mind of awareness, a mind of openness. And you start exploring, what is it about this situation? What are the causes and conditions that have caused this issue that I have? Or what do I know about it? What don't I know about it? What am I not seeing? And so it helps us to kind of see the problem more clearly. And hopefully we can come up with some ideas. We can come up with some ideas and a better understanding and new ideas of where we go from there. And the last stage is we check in with ourselves. How do we feel? And this is an important thing because it tells us what is our emotional relationship with the problem we have or the thing that we want to work on. And so it helps us gain a better understanding of ourselves and what we want to achieve, what blocks us, and anything like that.
Yeah,
And
so
I'm
this
really,
was,
from
yeah, go.
the two times that we did the meditation and the feedback that we've had, I was really surprised and also happy to know that people had different personal experience with it. And that's great. That's the goal of it, is to have a personal experience, because each one of us is exploring our own unique situation.
Yeah. I have some quotes from the last one we did coming up, but I did want to mention one of the things that I think is interesting about this is it's almost shocking, like when you're in these meditative states, and then we go, okay, now we want to bring you to your problem. And I just remember going like, this is like a huge shift, but it's happening right after this situation where we've brought ourselves to this open awareness perspective. And then there you are, it's like shock therapy. Suddenly, you're dealing with this goal or this problem. So it takes a while to make that transition. But once that transition occurred, it felt like I was able to think of things that I hadn't thought of before. And I think that the other people had some of that experience too. Vince, you were here for both of those, right? What was your impression at that transition?
Well, I think I mentioned to you the term anxiety came up, and it redirected my focus to a smaller portion of my initial question to the universe. And I got positive results around it because it helped me sleep better that night. And I saw value in this process that I'd never experienced before. Different from TM. I did TM for many years, but this experience was directed at getting rid of discomfort, getting rid of anxiety, getting rid of uncertainty. And yeah, I did notice that I came up with new solutions afterwards, which seem effective. I definitely have gone through a lot in this last week even. So is that what you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just curious what was happening. And did you notice this transition from the meditative state to the reading what you wrote, or were you thinking about the problem during the meditation itself?
No, the instructions I was given was to put all my attention upon focused awareness and body scan, and
Okay.
then I allowed myself to look at what I'd written and to think about it once we'd reached that point.
I see.
So,
But that transition was easy, was it
yeah,
not?
it was easy.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. That's good to know. Okay, so I have a couple more slides. Let's see if I can. Oh, these are like eye charts that I tell Morella she can't do.
Right, exactly. You made me delete those. So
Yeah, okay. Well, there. What I think is, don't read this, but I'll tell you roughly what's going on here. There were some people who said what Vince just said, which was that they started out with the problem being so big it was oppressive, and Morella was very clear about this, that having it be small, less of a big overwhelming problem is good. And then a couple of people said that was great, and then somebody else said, I started with a narrow goal, but I realized it was part of a bigger problem. So what I think is interesting is our first podcast episode was on something called self-similarity. It was how to look at a problem or a situation from a very narrow point of view and then zoom out and look at a situation from a much broader view and then go back and forth. And so this is, and Tom is probably familiar with it, and Horia too, probably familiar with this from a scaling property within an Agile setting. You have a little team and you think about the team and you think about its particular issues, but if you want to be Agile as a larger entity, you actually have to, you have to zoom out and you have to think about the whole set of teams working together and what they're trying to achieve. And then you zoom way out and then you think about the whole organization, and potentially you could zoom out further and think about the society in which we're operating. In all of those cases, it can be very helpful because each time you zoom out, other options may appear and you gain some freedom as an independent actor within that. But then it gets overwhelming, right? Like you want to solve world peace, right? So that's just too overwhelming for us. And then zooming back in to our individual contexts and our personal models is potentially good. So the second thing that happened, and this was a person who went to a narrower goal in order not to be overwhelmed. She said she felt activated, and that is sort of what happened to me too. It's like I was able to think of a bunch of options that hadn't occurred to me previously, and many of those options are happening now. For example, this even this session, like having a little chit chat with buddies about what we're thinking about was one of the outcomes of this. So I think that's it for the presentation. But
Thank you.
but comments or thoughts are welcome.
I Dan, I was the one who started small and then realized it was larger. Which was a really interesting experience. I just wanted to put that out there.
I think I knew that. I was preserving your
You're anonymous.
No, it was good, but it was and I guess the one thing I might I was talking to Merle about this, and trying to decide for someone who's new at meditation. It was a bit overwhelming for me because I just started with something small. Like I tend to I want to lose a little bit of weight, and my issue is, I get up in the middle of the night and I get out and have a snack, and I was just like, okay, why am I doing that? And it, like a lot of stuff, it's become some bigger thing, like any type of, I guess, self-soothing behavior, and it was a little overwhelming at first. So I was curious if that's something we just have to be, warned or concerned about, that it can be a little overwhelming. I was overwhelmed, but I felt like I had enough experience to deal with it. But I'm curious if someone was newer, if it's something we just have to be careful of. I don't know what you think about that, Marilla or Dan.
Morella and I have talked about it, and Morella convinced me that we do have to worry about it.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's part of the, I think that's why I stress the fact that it needs to be something that it's not very important or difficult. And the second thing is that every meditation practice, there is that risk. And I think it's a good observation. One other thing I need to add is that in the beginning of meditation is that anybody can stop at any time if it becomes too overwhelming. So that's another. I usually do that in meditations, especially in meditations that are a little bit more emotionally charged, like a meditation with emotions and stuff like that. But yeah, Tom.
Yeah, I came in halfway through that session that you had that Dan and Matt are referring to. So Matt, I can appreciate the overwhelmingness that you were feeling. But for me, the overwhelming is completely different. The overwhelming is I overthink things, and I will be in the middle of doing this, and I will be thinking, what am I supposed to be thinking? What am I supposed to be coming out of this with? What should I say when I come out of this? Because I know that Dan's going to ask the question, well, how did it go? And I will thinking about everything else instead of being there in the moment. I will just overthink it.
Marilla, can you bring that up
that's
about
part of that? That's part of the mindfulness. You are aware that that's happened, and you sometimes it's funny, like we can have some humor about it, and like, oh, that's what's happening in my mind. That's interesting. That's funny.
Yeah,
Our minds
very
can
mindful.
be funny that way too.
Yeah, I'm mindful that happens, but I have no self-control, so I just can't bring it back in. So I need a little more self-control, maybe. I don't know.
Marilla, can you bring up about what you've talked about before, about asking people at the end of a meditation how they feel, and about you have gone back and forth about that,
I have, yeah. So there are some mindfulness teachers who suggest that at the end of meditation, people have this meditative state, and it's better to kind of just let it go, like let them go with that, like not have a discussion at the end. And I don't know how everybody feels about that. But the other consideration is that because this is a little bit different, because we are kind of working with an issue, with a problem in meditation, rather than having just a regular, mindfulness of breathing session or loving kindness meditation session. So I don't know which one is best. I'm not sure about it. I think both ways, like either letting people go at the end of meditation without asking for anything, or talking about it, because yeah, people can have questions like you did, Matt, and like you did, Tom. Like people want to talk about it at the end sometime, and I'd like to give people the option to ask those questions about their experiences.
And when we did it, we didn't make people talk.
No.
I don't, we didn't go, hey, Tom, you didn't say anything. You better tell us what was going on.
But that's what Tom thought all the time.
Yeah, I was sure that was going to happen.
Participate, I'm gonna help. I have to have something to contribute.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
I got issues, Dan, you know that.
Well, we all have issues. I know that
all
only
do.
because we all have issues.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been great. Thank you for coming.